Hi, Mystery Recaps. Today I'll be breaking down a chilling drama called Marple, the Moving Finger. Spoilers ahead, so watch carefully. The story centers on Jerry Burton, a war veteran struggling to adjust to civilian life after World War II. He was left seriously injured from a motorbike crash, bedridden for months, and now, as part of his final recovery, he and his sister Joanna leave London for the quiet countryside village of Limstock. But their timing couldn't be worse. The small community is already rattled by tragedy. A beloved figure, Colonel Appleton, has taken his own life after receiving a vicious poison pen letter accusing him of cheating on his late wife. The colonel was a deeply religious man who adored his wife above all else, and once the whispers began, shame drove him to a devastating decision. The Burton siblings settle into a farmhouse owned by Miss Emily, who even leaves her loyal maid, Partridge, to look after them. At first the village feels calm, almost idyllic. The neighbors are welcoming, and the newcomers are quickly invited into local homes. Their first stop is with Mrs. Maud Calthrop, the priest's wife, who has invited her friend Miss Jane Marple for tea. Over cups of tea, Maud confides that anonymous poison pen letters have been spreading like wildfire, and she insists these nasty rumors were what destroyed Colonel Appleton. Miss Marple, sharp-eyed and cautious, doesn't buy into that theory so easily. The siblings later visit Mr. Pye, a flamboyant, eccentric bachelor with a taste for scandal and a sharp tongue. He openly criticizes others in the community, but when Jerry questions him about the poison pen letters, his demeanor changes instantly. He refuses to comment on the colonel's death, and his discomfort leaves Jerry suspicious. On their way home, Jerry and Joanna bump into Mona Symington and her daughter Helen. The young woman is awkward, shy, and lonely, clearly overshadowed by her complicated family. Her mother's second marriage left her with two stepbrothers, making Helen feel like an outsider in her own home. Later, Jerry visits a local law office where he meets Helen's stepfather, Richard Symington, a solicitor who seems strangely unconcerned about the poison pen scandal rocking the village. Jerry also notices Richard's two boys in the care of their nanny Elsie, a striking young woman who immediately catches Jerry's attention. That evening, the siblings visit Dr. Owen, the village physician. He's a nervous man who stutters through conversations, but during Jerry's routine checkup, he encourages him to try walking without his cane. Joanna, meanwhile, seems unusually taken by the timid doctor. Days later, the Symingtons host a grand dinner party to welcome the Burton siblings to town. Everyone in the village gathers, and predictably, gossip flows as freely as the wine. Shocking whispers claim Colonel Appleton fathered a child with a mentally challenged girl, and this humiliation was what drove him to end his life. The rumor spreads like fire, but Jane Marple, watching the room closely, refuses to believe it. Her piercing eyes suggest that behind the polite smiles and chatter, far darker secrets are waiting to be uncovered. The next morning, 3 fresh poison pen letters arrive at the Symington house. Elsie casually places them on the table before taking the 2 little boys to the park. Hours later, she returns just as Richard Symington comes home from work. But the moment he walks upstairs, horror strikes. His wife Mona lies dead in her bedroom. Within minutes, word spreads like fire across the entire village. A detective rushes to the scene and inspects Mona's room. On her bedside table, he spots several medicine bottles and takes away a glass for testing. Then, in the fireplace, he notices half-burned paper. When he pieces it together, it's another poison pen letter, this one accusing Mona of having affairs with several men. Later, Jerry visits the Symington house, where grief hangs heavy. But none are more shattered than Helen. First her father abandoned her, and now her mother is gone too. Jerry, touched by her misery, offers her an escape. She can come live with him and Joanna at their farmhouse. Helen, desperate to flee the suffocating atmosphere, quickly agrees. Meanwhile, a village council meeting is held to decide what really happened to Mona. The detective reports his findings. Richard was at work, the boys were in the park with Elsie, the maid was on holiday, and Waldo was unaccounted for. He explains Mona received a letter that very afternoon, was shaken to her core, and ended her life with cyanide. Dr. Owen then testifies, confirming Mona suffered from neurosis. With that, the district judge rules it a suicide, not murder. Days pass and Helen begins to blossom in the company of the Burton siblings. Especially Jerry. One evening, while chatting in the garden about her future, Helen asks him to fetch her a drink of water. But when Jerry steps inside, he's startled. Dr. Owen is standing there, rifling through a shelf with a book of Russian tailies in hand. Caught red-handed, the doctor stammers an excuse, saying he was simply picking Joanna up for dinner. The very next morning, Dr. Owen's widowed sister Amy pays the farmhouse a visit. In hushed tones, she gossips with Jerry about Mona's death. Shockingly, she insists the poison pen letter Mona received must have been true. She even goes out of her way to defend Richard Symington, her tone oddly protective. After she leaves, Jerry receives his own letter, this time addressed to Joanna. It accuses her of having an illegitimate child and orders them to leave the village at once. Alarmed, Jerry takes the letter to the detective. The investigator studies it carefully. He notices no fingerprints but then reveals a breakthrough. Every envelope has the same odd quirk. The letters T and A are misaligned. Tits and ass, the detective mutters grimly. He explains that only a Wilson typewriter makes those exact errors, and there's just one in all of Limstock. It belongs to the Women's Community Center, a gift from the Symington family. That means the letter writer must be a middle-aged woman who frequents the center. The next day, Jerry strolls the garden when Partridge, the old caretaker, interrupts him. She requests a day off. Her friend Agnes, the Symingtons' maid, had phoned her in distress and begged to meet immediately. Jerry agrees, letting her go. But that night, Partridge returns as if nothing happened. Curious, Jerry asks about the meeting only to hear that Agnes never showed up. Moments later, the phone rings and Jerry's blood runs cold. Agnes has been found dead, her body stuffed inside the understairs cupboard of the Symington house. The next morning, Jerry, Jane, and the detective sit down to piece together the puzzle of the maid's death. They uncover a chilling truth: Agnes had gone out to meet her boyfriend on the very day Mona Symington died. But after a heated quarrel, she returned home much earlier than expected. That means she must have seen the person who slipped Mona that fatal poison pen letter. And for that reason alone, Agnes had to be silenced forever. Later that week, Mona's funeral service takes place at the village church. Jerry sits near Dr. Owen's sister Amy, who wastes no time in whispering venom. She sneers that Elsie, the nanny, is trying to seduce Richard Symington and hopes to replace Mona as his wife. Shockingly, Amy isn't the only one who believes this gossip. And during the burial itself, Richard explodes, arguing openly with Elsie, throwing blame at her for his wife's tragic death. The air grows heavy with scandal and suspicion. Back at the farmhouse, Jerry learns that his sister Joanna has been spending more and more time with Dr. Owen. In fact, the nervous doctor has even gifted her something bizarre, a photo of an overgrown spleen. Joanna laughs it off, saying, "He remembered I have a thing for these." But when Jerry goes to put the photo away, he makes a startling discovery. He grabs a random book off the shelf, the same Russian stories book Dr. Owen had been caught holding weeks earlier. Its pages are torn out, and the typeface is identical to the one used in the poison pen letters. Suddenly, Jerry's suspicions shift sharply toward the doctor. Days pass and Jerry can't shake the feeling that something is horribly wrong. One evening, he comes home to find a note from Joanna. She has gone to the market, but is expecting a call from Dr. Owen. She asks Jerry to take any messages. But instead of calming him, the note unsettles Jerry even more. He doesn't trust the doctor's intentions, not one bit. The stress gnaws at him until he breaks his sobriety, pouring himself a drink after months of staying clean. A few days later, the villagers gather at eccentric Mr. Pye's home for an evening ceremony. Everyone expects light conversation, but instead, Miss Emily, owner of the Burton farmhouse, breaks down in tears. She sobs that rumors have spread accusing her of being behind the cruel letters, simply because the torn book had come from her shelf. Desperate, she insists she's innocent, pleading with the crowd to believe her. The room buzzes with whispers and doubt. But the tension only thickens when Mr. Pye himself stands up to reveal something explosive. He admits he too received a letter weeks ago, not a poison pen attack, but a final note from Colonel Appleton before his death. In the letter, the colonel confesses he was a closeted homosexual with a secret lover outside the village. He urged Pi to accept his own identity, warning him not to live a life of regret and loneliness. The revelation sends shockwaves through the gathering. Some villagers react with disgust, others with stunned silence. Nobody knows what's true anymore. Rumor and reality have become tangled into one murky web. Meanwhile, at the Women's Center, the detective sets his trap. He knows the Wilson typewriter, the only machine in the entire village capable of producing those flawed letters, sits in the library. So he hides in the shadows, watching, waiting. Hours pass in silence. Until finally, under cover of night, someone sneaks in and begins to type. The mysterious writer has taken the bait. The scene shifts abruptly. Jerry arrives at Dr. Owen's office for a routine checkup. His sister Amy is there too, chatting casually when suddenly the door bursts open. The detective storms in with police officers right behind him. He announces that at 1:30 a.m. The previous night, he personally caught Amy at the Women's Center using the Wilson typewriter. She was typing an address meant for Elsie. With this discovery, all eyes fall on Amy, and whispers ripple through the room. Has the mystery been solved at last? The evidence stacks up quickly. It's revealed Amy had long harbored feelings for Richard Symington. Consumed by jealousy, she accused his wife of infidelity, driving Mona to her death. And with Mona gone, her next target was Elsie, the young nanny Richard had been drawn to. The motive seems clear, the timing perfect. Everyone in the village nods, convinced Amy is the twisted mind behind the poisoned pen letters and murders. But not Jane Marple. The sharp old woman sits quietly, unconvinced. Something doesn't add up, and she refuses to let the village settle for the wrong culprit. Later, she pulls Jerry and Helen aside and outlines a daring plan to expose the true killer. That night, the trap is set. Helen approaches her stepfather Richard with cold determination. She threatens him, hinting she has proof that he tampered with her mother's medication. Richard panics, doesn't confess, but instead scribbles out a check to buy her silence. Helen accepts and retreats to her room. Hours later, Richard creeps in with a glass of water laced with sleeping tablets. Helen drinks it, drifts into unconsciousness, and he drags her limp body downstairs. With chilling calm, he places her head inside the gas oven, certain that he will get away with yet another murder. But he has no idea he's walking into a trap. The moment Richard leans over his stepdaughter, Jane Marple's plan springs into action. Jerry, the detective, and police officers crash through the door, catching him red-handed. In shock, Richard is arrested not only for the attempted murder of Helen, but also for the deaths of his wife and the maid. With the investigation finally cracked open, the full truth spills out. Richard had been infatuated with Elsie, his children's nanny. To clear the path, he masterminded the poisoned pen letters as a smokescreen, framing the village in gossip and lies. Using his position as a solicitor, he drew on private case details to give his letters terrifying authenticity. Months earlier, he had even typed them all on his Wilson machine before donating it to the Women's Center, making it almost impossible to trace the crime back to him. At last, the real culprit is unmasked, not Amy, but Richard Symington himself. His greed, lust, and cruelty poisoned the quiet village of Limstock, leaving a trail of broken trust and shattered lives. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.